What up, party people? It's your boy, Mike the Mentor, coming at you live for another Tuesday Thoughts here. Thought I'd come in a little earlier today since I got class again at 8 o'clock. And I'd rather post early and then post late into the night. And I'm sure you guys appreciate that too. So welcome. If you're watching the replay, welcome as well. I hope you guys get a lot out of this, right? So every Tuesday, we're discussing things that have to do with us being better fathers, better husbands, better men. And that's kind of a microcosm of what this page is all about. So if you're new and this is your first time seeing one of my videos, this whole idea was birthed out of two things. One, it was birthed out of me getting sick and tired of seeing men take their lives, right? Commit suicide. I've got my own personal experience with suicide and my brother taking his life when I was a college sophomore. And over the past few years, if you've watched any sort of news, you've seen a multitude of celebrities, right, who are supposedly have it all, take their lives, and then come to find out that they were struggling with a lot of things. Some things, we'll never know. And the majority of people who take their lives happen to be men. And men are wandering around like zombies, and they're living silent lives of suffering because in society as men we're taught to take all our feelings and stuff them down, and that's just what you do. And you bite down, you grit your teeth, and you move on and overcome. And I know and understand why that was necessary in our society and to get us to the place that we are now. And this is something that's developed over decades and decades of things happening. But in that process, men have lost their hearts, right? We've lost the ability to connect with our wives, connect on a deeper level with our kids, and connect truly with ourselves, right? And we get to this place where not only are we lying to others, right? And what I mean by lying is you might not be intentionally going out and telling lies to manipulate people, but you're lying because you're not facing the reality, right? You're wearing this mask. You're putting on this front that everything is good with you, that you don't have any problems, that you don't need help with anything, that you're this self-made person and you can do it all by yourself, which is completely wrong and is completely the opposite of how we were created for fellowship with other people. And no one does life alone. And if you take that attitude and you have that attitude and you try to forge your way through life, not only are you going to experience a lot of heartaches, a lot of bumps along the way, but you're going to have a lot of blind spots. And if you don't have anybody in your life that you can trust to share these things with and to help point these things out, I truly believe you're not going to live your life to the fullest. And that's how, and I know from experience because that's how I lived a majority of my life, right? That mentality. I was raised mostly by my grandpa, was the dominant male figure in my life. And he was old school Army vet, and it was discipline, and it was hard work, and it was don't show your emotions unless it's anger. And it wasn't till after my brother committed suicide that this transformation took place, not only in his heart, but in a lot of people's hearts within my family, that there was more showing of emotion. I'd see my grandpa cry. I'd see, we'd have these heart-to-heart conversations about what it was like for him growing up in a poor family like he did, and living next to a garbage dump and not having anything, and how that influenced his life and made him such a hard worker, and that desire to be somebody, right? But my point in all this is, right, like you need to get to a point where you stop lying to others and you stop lying to yourself about how you feel, right? It's very easy for us to come into a situation, right, and for there to be some sort of of conflict. And I'm not saying conflict is bad, because there is good conflict, right? There's good tension, but it's to take those feelings and not even being able to acknowledge how we feel. Are we feeling sad? Are we feeling angry? Are we feeling desperate? Are we feeling anxious? Right? To put our finger on those feelings, and then to own those feelings, and then to do something about it. And that's part of why this world is so messed up the way it is because men have lost their hearts along the way. And the second reason for me doing this page and coming live and doing these videos is growing up without a father. I was missing something very crucial in my life. And I don't care who you are, everybody wants to be chosen in some way, right? And as kids, it starts where we want to be chosen by our parents. And if our parents aren't there, especially if you're a man and you want to have a strong relationship with your father, and your father's not there, you're going to look to be chosen in another way. And my way was running towards girls, right? I tried to get my validation through them. And then when that stage of my life was over, I tried to get my validation from my wife. But really, the only person who can give us that validation is the person who chose us from the very beginning, and that was God, right? So I'm here to share my experiences and share the wisdom that I've learned from going through all these tough situations and dealing with these hard things with other men who want to make a difference in their lives, who want to live more authentically and more deeper and more richer, and have deeper relationships with the people that are around them, their family, their friends, their brothers, their wives, their children. So that's where I'm coming from. And I noticed, reflecting back on my life, that the two biggest factors for me was, one, the grace of God, because without God's grace, I wouldn't be here today. Literally, I'd be dead. And there were instances I've talked about on this page where I should have been dead, like in 6th grade when I got hit by the car, went across 4 lanes, landed on my head, and somehow walked away out of that with just a broken collarbone and a very sprained ankle. I can think of another situation where I was returning home from a date and I fell asleep at the wheel late, and I woke up to my car doing 360s in the middle of the highway, and I swear there was like semis and cars coming right at me, but I came out of that spin and went into the median, and all these cars passed me by, thank God. So just cases like that. The other thing that I was able to recognize is that I had mentors in my life, mentors that I actively sought out, right, so I could make my life better. And the ones that I sought out were through books, right, reading stories about other men, other people, in the situations that they came from in their lives, and how they made a choice to do something about it, and they worked themselves out of their situation through a multitude of different things and ways. And that gave me hope, right, that I could do something about the situation that I was in, that the life that I was in, and there was some sort of control that I had over that situation, and a choice that I could always make. And I'm a firm believer that in any situation you have a choice, whether it's a choice over your attitude, whether it's a choice on how you're going to react to things, whether it's a choice of what your next steps are going to be. There's always a choice, right? It's never just a one-sided thing. And I also had mentors that God placed in my life, men who came alongside me, saw something in me, and said, "Word, Charles, it's right. I am going to hold you to a higher standard because I see potential in you. I'm going to cast vision in your life. I'm going to encourage you." And they did that in a lot of different ways, whether it was coaches spending a little extra time with me in the gym after practice, or just encouraging me with saying, "Hey, great job today," or it was men like my first mentor, Bob Vanderpool, who took me alongside and made me a part of his family at times, let me eat dinner with them, took me out to lunch, allowed me to see him interact with his wife and his kids and his the people in the community, took me on vacations with him, opened my eyes to the possibility of what else was out there in the world besides this little bubble that I was in at home, this bubble of dysfunction, this bubble of chaos and heartbreak and all these things, and allowed me to see that there is so much good in life that is available to all of us if we'll just take the steps and make the choices to go after it. So that's what this page is about. So enough about that, enough about me. Tonight's topic is, and you think I would forget about all that after that long rant. So it's basically, what would Columbo say about your wife? And the reason that I'm titling this is because as men, we need to be studying our wives, like, intently, right? Like, we should know intimate things about our wives. Not only intimate things, but even mundane things. Like, I just think about, like, questions to ask myself, like, if I went to a certain restaurant, what would my wife order? And that doesn't mean that I just order it for her without asking, but it's good to know, what types of things does my wife like? What are her favorite meals? What is my wife's love language? Right? Is her love language gifts? Is her love language non-affectionate touch? Is her love language verbal praise, words of affirmation? Is her love language acts of service? Right? Not what my love language is, but what is my wife's love language? Another good question is, if my wife had a free day where she didn't have no responsibility, she didn't have to deal with the kids, she didn't have work, what would she do? What would she like to do? What are my wife's hobbies? Right? Like, if my wife wasn't being a mother and wasn't working, and she could passionately pour herself into one thing, what would that be? Right? Do you know that answer about your wife? Do you know what makes your wife come alive every time she talks about it? And here's some hints if you don't. Look at the things that your wife does, right? The things that maybe she posts on Facebook, if she posts. My wife's obvious. She's posting pugs all day long, pugs and pictures of the kids. But what are the books that she's reading? And not only what are those books that she's reading, but what are the messages that are being conveyed in those books that she's reading? How are those books speaking to her? What TV shows is she watching when she's by herself? And I don't mean just the TV shows that, like the Real Housewives of Atlanta or whatever, these things that we turn to when we just want to veg out. But when we want to learn, what are the things that interest her? And don't make the mistake that I made, right? And if you want to know some of these things, don't interrogate your wife. Like, make it a general conversation. And that's obviously different for every couple, and you got to learn how to navigate those waters. But I'm a very inquisitive person. I like to ask a lot of questions, and a lot of time that can be overwhelming for people. And I needed to learn that, right, and understand that. And my wife will answer my questions, but I have to go about it a certain way, right, where I'm not just bombarding her, and that goes along with a person's personality. Like, I tend to be a very deep thinker. My wife, she can go on that level, but she's a people person. She, likes to, talk about more surface things until, she really gets to know you, where, I'll just jump right in and we'll go deep, and I'll ask you about your fears and, what was the hardest thing about growing up, or what's the hardest thing about being you, those type of things. But my whole point in this is, like, as men, right, as husbands, it's our job to study our wives all the time, right, and paying attention to what's going on in their world. And not only that, because that's just step one. Step two is then executing on those things. Like, it's one thing to know something, it's another thing to take that knowledge and to do something with it. Like, I'll give you a perfect example, right? Like, I know somebody whose their relationship, what their wife's love language is, because they've shared that with me. And we've had these conversations, and it's interesting, right? And, like, we all have it. Like, I've experienced it too. We know what our spouse's love language is. We've been studying them. We know what would speak to them and really, like, make a difference in their day. as simple as it can be, right? It could be like just giving your wife like some flowers, right? But we won't do it. There's this roadblock. There's this jam, and I want to challenge you that jam is probably in your heart, and it probably stems from maybe some unforgiveness or some bitterness or some resentment that you may have towards your spouse because of something they did, whether it was unspoken or not, whether they realize it or not. So my advice to you, if that is you, is find somebody that you can trust and share that with them. If you're feeling prompted by God to take that to your spouse, and only He knows that, and only He can help you walk that through, take that to Him. But maybe that it's not the time for that, but you still need to share it with somebody who's close to you, because what that'll do is that will bring release. That will take that feeling that you're carrying of resentment, right, and it'll take it off your back so you can set it down, and then you'll be able to move forward, and you'll want to start speaking your spouse's love language to them. Wow, I just stopped all the momentum that I had because my mind was running off. But yeah, so I would just encourage you to do that, right? To study your wife. Maybe you take, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe it's as simple as taking out a piece of paper and on a notepad writing your wife's favorite things, right? Like, what's your wife's favorite meal? What's your wife's favorite thing to do for a date night? What's your wife's favorite author? What is your wife's favorite place to go? And then I would encourage you to take action behind those things and find ways that you can help your wife experience those things in a manner that helps your marriage and helps both of you, right? Like, so with me studying my wife and just knowing, like, I'm a planner. Like, that's how I think. I'm very, like, I can be very logical. I can be very orderly. 1, 2, 3, right? So I will take it upon myself, if we're gonna do something, to plan things out. Like, if we're gonna go away, like, all right, research the tickets, research the places to stay. This is the day we're going to leave, this is the day we're going to come back, this is the hotel we're going to stay at. Put all those details together. One, it's not like my wife can't do it. She could easily do it. But two, I know that one, she would prefer not to. And two, like, that's my honor as her husband to be able to do that, because that speaks her love language, and to be able to remove the stress and the things that come with planning things like that. Same for date nights. As men, we need to be taking those responsibilities on, right? So I'll get the babysitter. I'll plan where we're going to go to dinner. I'll ask for input from my wife, but sometimes I'll just have everything all set up. So it's a matter of me just letting my wife know, hey, on Saturday we're going out at this time. I've got everything taken care of. Here's what here's the dress or whatever. Because my wife's always wondering about, what's the dress code here? Are we dressing up or are we dressing down? That's the part about knowing your wife. Like, my wife, the dress code is important to her, so I can save her angst and time of preparation. So that's it for tonight. I just want to encourage you, right? Like, Columbo was this detective on this show, and he was very inquisitive. He looked around and paid attention to his surroundings and what was going on, and he would piece things together, and nothing would get by this dude. Well, that's my encouragement. That's what you need to be like with your spouse in studying them. I know you got what it takes. I know you can do it, right? So this is part of being a man, is taking responsibility and rejecting passivity. Passivity is going the opposite way and saying, you know what, I'm upset about this, I'm not going to do that. Or, you know what, my wife, she should be helping me more. She should be the one, planning the date nights, because I'm working all day long. Don't have that attitude. Nothing good's going to come out of that, right? Pour your love into your wife. right? And if you're not feeling loved, my suggestion to you would be to get with God, right? And have God pour his love into you. Because if he pours his love into you, that's naturally going to overflow into your wife, and it's naturally going to overflow into your kids. My wife said an interesting thing to me the other day on my Saturday's men's group. She said, how was men's group? And I told her, hey, it was great. And she says, yeah, I know it was great because whenever you come home, uh, how did she say it? She said, you're much more loving towards me. Um, and it's true. When I get alone and I'm seeking after God and I'm spending time with him and he's speaking to me and speaking life into me, that just fills my emotional cup up. And then I come home and I'm able to give that away to my wife and to my kids. So that's it for tonight. I hope you guys found that valuable. That's right, Charles. That is truth. Um, I will see you guys tomorrow for Wednesday Wisdom. I love you guys. If you need anything, hit me up. I'm here for you. I'll talk to you later. Have a good night.